Now, it's no secret that we all need to be saving something for retirement, but it can be a challenge to know how much. After all, most of the expenses we incur in life come on a weekly or monthly basis. They're regular, and it's a lot easier to forecast the cash flow that we need for that. So for example, you might have a mortgage or rent payment that you know is 30% of your income. You might know that groceries are 10% of your income. You might know that utilities are normally about 8% of your income. And having those sort of fractionalized or segmented pieces of our paycheck each month allow us to better forecast what we need to actually meet those needs. The difficulty with retirement is that it's so far away, it can be hard for us to really visualize how much we need to save for retirement. So either what we do is we set aside what's left at the end of our paycheck or what's left at the end of the month after we spent money on everything else, or it's so complicated we don't even try at all, which is even worse. Well, in a bit, we're going to show you how much we think you should set aside each month for retirement based on a percentage of your income. But first, we're going to walk through the method we use to get there so you can make adjustments based on your personal situation, or better yet, know how you can calculate that number on your own. The first step is building a portfolio that will meet our cash flow needs. When we reach retirement, we're not going to be working for earned income like we were in our working years. We won't be going to a 40-hour-a-week job. We won't have a regular paycheck per se in the same way we did when we were working. So what we need to do is forecast how we can build a portfolio or a just chunk of assets that are big enough to actually throw off income or generate income for us to actually use in retirement to meet cash flow needs when we get there. Another way to think of your retirement portfolio is as stored labor. So what you're doing is you're putting away money now from the work that you're doing now so that you'll have money later when you're not working at all. Now obviously if you want to be retired for a very long time or want to spend a lot of money in retirement, you'll need a much larger portfolio. If you don't want to spend a lot, don't have a lot of, interests or goals or different things you want to do in retirement, you won't need quite as much income. Normally, the way this looks is you'll take a certain percentage of your portfolio and you'll put it in fixed income assets like government bonds, treasuries, CDs, money markets, things like this that are going to be very safe. You're going to have that for like a cushion of 5 to 7 years of income. That's kind of a conservative number, but that's just the one I go by. 5 to 7 years of expenses or income needs in retirement are going to be in those fixed income assets, and the rest you can invest for longer term. And as you have good years, you pull some of that money over into fixed income and take it out of the market, out of investments like stocks, mutual funds, ETFs, things like this. Move it into your fixed income assets so you'll have it in the years you need to actually spend that money down. Also, any cash flow you receive in retirement from annuities, pensions, Social Security, things like that, that actually serves to offset the income needs you'll have in retirement, and it can actually lower the portfolio amount that you need overall. We're going to explain later in the video how to account for that, but that'll be something that actually helps you in retirement if you have access to those sorts of regular income producing assets. All right, the second assumption that we made is that we'll need to replace about 80% of our current income. Now, you may ask yourself why we chose 80%. Well, the truth is 80% is sort of a widely accepted industry standard, and there's good reasons for that. First off, if you think about it while you're working, you should be saving some portion of your income for retirement every month or every paycheck. You won't be doing that when you're actually retired. So whatever portion you're saving now, you won't need to actually pull as income in retirement. So if you're saving 10% of your income now, you won't need that 10% to spend later because it'll be set aside for you and you won't be funding another retirement while you're in retirement. Another factor is currently 7.65% of every paycheck you get goes to Social Security or Medicare. Unless you're a small business owner, then it's twice that. But that's almost 8% of your income now that goes to a tax that you won't be paying in retirement. So now if you're 10% saving for retirement, 8% for Social Security, you're down to 18% lower than you need. Another factor is people in retirement typically have less or no debt than they did when they were working, or even if they have debt, say they have a mortgage that they're still paying on, by the time they reach retirement age, they're well into that mortgage and their income needs far outweigh that percentage of that mortgage payment every month. So if you own a house now, you know it's probably hardest to make that payment at the beginning of the mortgage, and the longer you owned it, you got income raises and things like that. It just got easier to pay down that balance. Well, that's also true for retirees who either have a small mortgage or no mortgage at all. Additionally, with all that said, there are recent studies that show most retirees are actually spending less than 70% of their pre-retirement income. So 80% feels like a very safe, very conservative assumption, and that's what we chose to use in the calculation of the table that we'll be showing you in just a minute. The third step is to take your annual income needs and account for a safe withdrawal rate from that portfolio of assets we talked about earlier so that you don't draw down the balance too quickly in retirement. Now, the widely regarded rule for this is the 4% rule. We're not going to get into the nuts and bolts of the 4% rule, but it is basically from a study that was done in the late 90s. The study showed that if you take a 4% withdrawal rate from a portfolio of retirement assets mixed with stocks and bonds, that over the course of 30 years, there was a very, very small chance that you'd run out of money. Now, over the years, this has been broadly accepted as an industry standard. Certified financial planners, financial analysts, all kinds of people use this as a sort of a go-by or back-of-the-napkin sort of number to sort of gauge your retirement needs. So if you know the expenses you'll have year to year in retirement, you multiply that by 25 because 25 is the reciprocal of 4%, which is 1/25 of 100. And that gives you your nest egg. That gives you a portfolio size that you need to withdraw 4% per year to last you 30 years in retirement. Now, since that study was published, a couple things have happened. One, people are retiring early, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And the second thing is people are living longer, which is most certainly not a bad thing. So retirements are actually expanding as time goes on. As a result, you may want to adjust this 4% rule. I still think it's pretty safe, pretty conservative. But if you're going to have a retirement that's 40, 50 years, you may want to pull down to a 3% withdrawal rate, which means you'd multiply that expense number times 33, or 2.5%, which means you multiply it times 40. It just means you need a larger nest egg to last you longer in retirement for a longer retirement so you don't run out of money before you die. The fourth assumption we made was about the rate of return these assets would actually see each year as they were invested. Now, we used 8%, and 8% to some people will seem a little aggressive, and to some people it will seem really conservative. The S&P 500 has actually returned 10.6% on average since its inception years ago. We talked earlier about a portfolio that's actually going to be mixed in stocks and bonds. S&P 500 is all stocks, so if you're getting 10 to 11% out of that basket of assets, and your bonds are returning anywhere from 5 to 7, depending on how you have that allocated. If you have more stocks than bonds, it'll be higher. If you have more bonds than stocks, it'll be lower. But 8% is the number we chose for this scenario. If you want to be more or less conservative, we'll show you in a minute how we got our numbers, and then you can adjust the calculation yourself. One of the things I really want to be sure we highlight at this point is the impact that compounding interest actually plays on the success of building your retirement portfolio. And the compounding will adjust either up or down based on the actual realized rate of return your portfolio sees. So for a quick example to understand compounding interest, let's just pretend for a minute that your money will double every 5 years. So let's say you have $1. At the end of 5 years, it means you'll have $2, right? Well, if you go 5 more years, now you have 10 years total. Your $1 will turn to $2 in 5 years, but at year 10, you don't have $3, you have $4 because the second dollar you earned at year 5 has now doubled as well. So now you have $4 at year 10, you'll have $8 at year 15, and $16 at year 20. So in 20 years, you have 16 times what you started with. If you weren't factoring compounding interest into that calculation, you might assume that you would just have $4 at the end of 20 years, but because of compounding interest, you have 4 times that amount. Understanding compounding interest is critical to your success in building a portfolio because it is such an aggressive tailwind for you as you try to invest and save for retirement. We actually have another video we've done about compounding interest, which I'll link above in the description below if you want to check that out. Finally, here are the numbers that you need to save as a percentage of your income based off how far you are away from retirement. So if you're only 5 years away from retirement, you'll need to save 327% of your income, which is kind of aggressive to say the least. If you're 20 years away from retirement, you'll need to save about 41% of your income. If you're 25 years away, you can save a more realistic 25% of your income. If you're 30 years away, only 16% is required. 35 years away, only 10%. And finally, if you're 40 years away from retirement, only 7% of your income needs to be set aside each month for retirement. Now, we actually did a table that takes every number from years from retirement 1 through 50 and actually gives you a percentage of income that you need to save each month in order to reach that goal. It's on our website at martinmoney.com. I'll put a link down in the description below so you can follow that if you'd like. And speaking of video, if this video is helpful to you, please click the like and subscribe buttons below to show your appreciation so I can continue making content to help people learn about finance. Now let's do an example to show you how you might actually calculate your own number using a fictional character we call Freddie Fire. As you know, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. Freddie's actually 30 years old and he wants to retire in 30 years when he reaches age 60. Freddie's current income is $100,000 a year, which means he'll need to replace $80,000 when he retires at age 60. Now, using the 4% rule, we can take Freddie's goal of $80,000 of income and multiply that by 25 to calculate $2 million nest egg that he'll need in retirement. And based on our table for retirement that's beginning 30 years from now, Freddie will need to save 16% of his income, or $16,000, in order to meet his goal. Now, some of you will be quick to point out that in the first year that Freddie's saving based on this table, he's actually giving a little more than $16,000. That's actually a rounding error. We didn't want to put, tons of decimal places on the screen to kind of confuse and aggravate all of you. Just know that 16% is a rounded number. 16.7 is the actual one. I think we actually have more detailed numbers on our website if you really care to that degree. And just to reiterate the importance of compounding interest, notice that after 20 years, Freddie isn't even halfway to his goal. He's 2/3 of the way there time-wise, but not even halfway there monetarily. That's the power of compounding interest. Really, the final years of your stored income or your invested assets produce the greatest returns, which only serves to draw attention to the fact that you really need to start this process as early as possible, because time is really a great asset in helping you build wealth. So I know some of you are watching this and you're kind of aggravated because we've had to make some assumptions and you want a really detailed, accurate number. And the truth is, we can't really give that over video. Everybody's retirement is a little different. And there's so many factors that play into this, right? Your income level now, your income level later in life, the rate of return that you actually experience, the number of years you have until retirement are just a few of the things that come into play. And we didn't even factor in inflation into this whole equation. So I can't emphasize enough that this is only a rule of thumb, and that's okay. A lot of us, we picture retirement as if we're shooting archery and we have a bow and an arrow and a target that's far away in a field, and we have to just kind of cut it loose with the right sort of power and the right angle and just hope it hits the mark, when it's really not like that at all. It's more like a road trip. Pretend, for example, that you're traveling from Seattle, Washington to Atlanta, Georgia. Now, generally, you need to go kind of east-southeast to get there, and you'll have to do it for a very long time. But if you're starting in Seattle, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to drive to the end of your driveway. And then you're going to take a left turn or a right turn. And you're going to go down a street. And then you're going to take another left or right turn. Eventually, you're going to work your way through town, probably to an interstate. And you're going to start driving east, either east or south, until you hit another interstate. And each of these turns is going to help you move in the direction you need to go, but they're choices you make along the way. Well, life is that way. A lot of things will happen between now and the time you retire that will cause you to adjust course. You may have kids, you may get married, you may get laid off, you may get a better job, you may move, you may have health issues, or your parents may have health issues, or your kids may have health issues. There's so many factors that come into play, and you're going to have to be flexible enough to make adjustments as you go. The great thing is, once you get kind of good at calculating this number, you can make those tweaks pretty easily, even in the back of your mind in the middle of the day if you want. For me personally, I think annually is frequently enough to kind of check things to see if you're on track to the retirement you want. If you want to do it more frequently, I know there are people who do this like every day. To me, that's a bit excessive, but whatever floats your boat, go for it. The point is, you just need to take some control, keep an eye on things, and make tweaks as you go. If you really want to develop a hyper-accurate forecast of your retirement needs, the first thing you need to focus on is your spending in retirement. You need to identify what your actual spending needs will be, because that determines how much you need. It's not your income. So many people focus on, I need this much money or this much income. All of that is determined by how much you'll actually spend in retirement. So if you take nothing else from this video, know that you need to identify that number first. And once you have that expense number, you can factor in things like Social Security, pensions, annuities, those income producers in retirement that will actually offset your need to pull money out of a portfolio. So if your need in retirement was $100,000, but you have $40,000 of income from Social Security and pensions, then you're only actually going to need $60,000 out of your portfolio each year to fund the retirement that you want. The third step, and a challenging one to say the least, is actually forecasting your rate of return. The market has swoons, ups and downs, inflation impacts it. Even bond markets can be a little raucous at times. I would suggest having a very conservative estimate of what your rate of return is. That way, if you overshoot it, you'll just have too much money, which is a much better problem than not having enough. Like I said, in this video, we used 8%, which I think is kind of conservative. I've seen people use numbers as low as 6%. That's really up to you. Finally, once you have that rate of return, you can project the different contribution levels you'll need to make now to reach that nest egg number once you reach retirement. Now, we have lots of other information on our website at markmoney.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel for other videos about topics like this related to retirement. As always, we are grateful for your interest in our video. God bless and take care.